The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lions, how's it going?
Technology. We just
Yeah.
spent like a lot of 20 minutes. It's actually not terrible. 20 minutes
No.
getting technology sorted.
No, I mean, it's 19 minutes worse than I thought you were at your job. But, it's, yeah, how you like that? How do you like working so hard to give me something and then just having me immediately crap all over it? Does that feel good?
No, this is just like a decade-long con. Once I have enough of you talking, I'm going to cut together you saying a bunch of truly heinous things.
Well, I don't think you even need to do that anymore. If I remember correctly, like they have AI that can just make, once you have enough of an audio of a person. And I think the big thing is it's only legal if it's like in the public domain or something like that, Yeah,
the laws around it are very not clear because this is also new. The alarming thing is there is way more than enough audio of both of us to make that a trivial endeavor.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just grab any like 10 episodes, download them and be like, okay, now I have George and Lions puppets and here's what I want them to say.
Yeah. Is it Planet Money, I think? NPR show. They did an entire episode where they were like, oh, we're curious about like how AI could impact the economy. So we are going to go to one of these companies that does AI voices and have them recreate voices of NPR hosts and and have AI write the script of the episode. And like they went through the entire process and some of the economic and legal ramifications. And like, it was very educational and interesting. And then they released the entire episode. And then at the end came in and like had other NPR hosts gather around and they were like, okay, like, what did you think of that episode? And a few of them were like, oh, well, like it was good, but it sounded like a little bit stilted and like it wasn't, maybe like you weren't as comfortable with the subject matter or you weren't feeling well or something. Like they knew something was wrong. And several of them who were also economists just laser focused in on like nothing you said made any sense. but the thing that was alarming was the people who weren't economists didn't know that, right? To them, it sounded totally recognized or, believable. Like they were using appropriate terminology. And I was just listening to this the whole time thinking like, oh God, someone could easily do that to basically anyone under 30 because anyone under 30 has made Instagram reels or a TikTok account, or they have YouTube videos. So like there's already a bunch of their face and voice digitized and you don't need that much, right? It's not like they were able to do it with the NPR host because they had tens of thousands of hours. They used, I think, like 20 hours or like nothing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like basically 20 episodes of our show. And then, it's and the thing that's concerning then is that like you need to now be a subject matter expert to, pick apart the fact that it's wrong, so like.
Exactly. Which is terrifying.
Yeah, right. Because, like it makes me think of, there was one time at work where, and I might have shared this on the show before, so I apologize if I have, but basically long story short is it was myself and like two colleagues. Right. And both of them were, like about my level, but like one level below. Right. And so we're talking in front of a third person, like we're all trying to explain something to this fourth person. Right. And so long story short is that one of the guys says, oh yeah, thing A, thing B, and thing C. And what he said was mostly gibberish, and like, so like there's a quick pause and he reports to me. Right. So I'm like so I started to say like, well, kind of, but, and then to like do a redirect because I didn't want to humiliate the guy, right? But also like what he said didn't make any sense. And then before I could get that off, the person beside him said, those are science words. They are not the right science words. And then I just completely fell apart.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's like everything you said is a science word, but it when you put them together like that, none of it makes any sense. And I was like, yeah, I mean, he's right though. Like that didn't make any sense. So, yeah, that. But the thing is that, somebody else could have walked in and been like, oh yeah, that sounds super scientific. But, yeah, we played video games this week is my understanding.
We did. Like every good week, there were video games. Shall we shill quickly before we get into the video games?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we shall.
Keep listening, subscribe, make recommendations to your friends. Here's a fun thing. We are going to do for patrons, because everybody who subscribes to the Patreon gets the after show, even for as little as $1. We are going to do a like guess the music game.
Yeah.
Like name that tune, sort of.
I'm very excited about it.
I'm excited too. That was the technology stuff we were struggling with before we started recording. And so if this entire plug for the Patreon is not in the shipped episode, then you will know. You, George, we will know that means it did not work. But I think it's going to be fine. Things are fine. Everything's probably going to be fine.
Definitely, probably fine.
Definitely, probably, maybe. So ratings and reviews, super helpful if you like what we're doing. But direct recommendations, I think, are still the best. And if you support us at high enough levels, you get your name shouted out on the show. And if I had that list pulled up ahead of time, I wouldn't be grasping at straws right now.
That's okay. As long as we can keep it fluid, then we don't have to cut it. But if we can't keep it fluid, like if we let too much dead air happen, then we would have to cut it. So that's why I'm just going to keep talking about us not cutting it, so we don't have to cut this.
I look forward to not having to cut this by just shoving as much nonsensical ramblings in here as possible. Got it.
Good job. We're professionals.
Thank you, 1Password, for making logging into Patreon quick and easy.
Woo!
Yeah, so if you want to get in on the after show, you only have to give us $1. There's dozens in there already, so you get the whole back catalog. Like, it's a lot, and you get them all for $1. That's not bad. But if you support us at a high enough level, I now know who those people are. We will shout you out on the show. So I first need to thank Keith, Josh, Jacob, and David, our 4-bit portables, our 8-bit classics, Kevin, John. There's a new one in here that I'd completely forgotten about. Jay Brent and Yarno, and our 16-bit hero, Michael. This is the most slipshod, just half-assed version of the Patreon shout-out that has ever happened. This is embarrassing and terrible, but I'm going to leave it all in because, you know what? I have enough editing work to do.
Right. And for $1,000, we will free Mike from the radiator.
Jesus.
See, you thought all that was gone, but it came back.
The very next day. Do you remember that from when you were a kid? The Cat Returns?
Yeah.
Oh man. It was like I don't think it was a Looney Tune, but it was like that era of animation, right? It's just like for kids. And it's maybe it was like a Dr. Seuss thing. I don't know. This guy has like a stray cat that won't leave him alone, and he's trying to get rid of it. And every time he thinks he has done something heinous enough to kill this cat, and then he gets back to his house after these like increasingly ridiculous escalations of like firing it into the ocean, like he gets back to his house and but the cat came back the very next day. And he's like going insane because as far as he's concerned, this cat is like a demon sent here to torture him forever. I don't know. I can't tell you anything else about it, but that music, because it comes, every single time he tries to get rid of the cat, they play that same like little interlude. And so it's just deep in my subconscious.
But I was actually listening to some of our old episodes and I was like, oh, we should at some point do that. Like if somebody paid us.
Yeah. At some point, if they paid us. Yeah.
If they pay us.
Whew. Okay. Mailbag.
We did it. Yes. Mailbag.
Yeah,
we did it.
We got through.
We're good at this. Thank God it's in a 6-year in episode, so we can't claim that. We didn't know what we were doing. Like we're veteran podcasters.
No, the problem is we don't know what we're doing is still a valid defense. It's no longer like a sympathetic excuse.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, we still don't know what we're doing. We just should by now. We got a mailbag question, and this one I thought brought you. Like I was just excited by how excited you were by this question, which I think is kind of fun. So the question is, if you both had to choose a Pokemon that you identify as, which one would it be? First 151 Pokemon only.
Yes.
So
and to be fair, I appreciate that they put that caveat in there, but that was just due to our age. That was always going to be what it was,
Agreed. I do also appreciate the specificity. I was actually just talking to my 9-year-old about Pokemon, like we were playing like a guessing or like a category game, like how many things in this category can you name?
Mm.
Kind of like name that tune but backwards, right? And she picked Pokemon, and so I like named, I named a few and she named some, and I was like, you can definitely name more than me, but you don't know my favorite Pokemon, Garbodor or whatever. And she was like, what is that? And I was like, the trash one, the one that's like a pile of garbage. And she was like shaking her head like, no. and I was like, okay, it has a slightly less stupid name, but there is a Pokemon that's a real pile of garbage. Hang on, let me go get my phone. And like,
hang on.
I looked it up and showed it to her, and she was like,
That's muck.
I've never seen. No, not that one. It's Trubbish, which is an actual pile of garbage. It is a sentient pile of garbage.
Dude, if you read some of the Pokédex entries, like they get ridiculous. I remember there was one where it was like, I think it was a fire centipede, like fire beetle or something like that. I don't know. It's one of the later generations, but it was like, oh, its skin can get up to like 900 degrees Celsius or something like that. And I'm like, that's enough to burn through the earth, like it's like glass is made at a lower temperature. Like there's physics problems when things start to get, or I think it was like 9,000 degrees Celsius is what it was. I was like, there are physics problems when things are, it's like, that's hotter than the surface of the sun. Like, I mean, like if all of a sudden, like I was like, how fast does it get that hot? Because then now it's superheating the air. So does a sonic boom happen when it just, suddenly like ups its temperature? How much does it have to eat in order to do this? Is this the Galactus of centipedes? Is this like the very, very hungry caterpillar where it's just like, but it doesn't turn into a butterfly, it turns into death?
Yeah, it turns into a nuclear holocaust.
I was like, oh my God, this is, and I'm sure that some writer somewhere was like, I don't know, high temperature. I'm like, no. Think this through. Yeah. When you say gets extremely hot or is very strong, you can litigate that to the end of time. But the second you put a measurement with a unit on something, then you're committed. Yes, you is. This is so sorry. What is your Pokemon?
So Pokemon a little better than me. So I actually spent some time going through the Pokedex, and there were like
I also picked some for you for conversation purposes. So
fun.
Yeah, no one's feelings are going to get hurt. Don't worry.
No, definitely not. So there were some that I was like, oh, that's a little like either aspirational or like self-deprecating, right? Like kind of right, and because they're all cartoon characters, so they're very extreme in their attributes. I settled on the one that I think is probably the most like realistically accurate, right? Like not hyperbolically silly. And then the one that I think I kind of aspire to, like what
nice aspirational Pokemon.
Yeah, like which Pokemon would I want people, or like do I kind of see myself as? So the one that I think is actually probably the closest to reality, right? Like not hyperbolic silly, taking a hyperbolic silly thing and trying to like normalize it, is Mankey, because they're highly social and quick to aggression, and they like to punch and kick things. And I was like, like I'm very social. I also fight with my friends sometimes, but like we're cool because we're all on the same page. So like that feels, I also kind of have a pig nose and am furry. So like, yeah, totally. Like I get that one. The one that I thought was like a little more on the aspirational side is actually Oddish, because they hate the heat. They just try to take it easy during the day, and then they're up all night. Like, and I was like, yeah, that I do kind of do that. Like I have to fight that impulse, but like enjoys being out in nature, but hates the heat, and then like gets up and parties. I was like, yeah, that's yes, that is.
Yeah, I wish. Right?
Yeah, I would spend a lot more of my time that way if I could.
So the ones that I picked for you, because like I kind of looked at it kind of through a similar, because again, to your point, right? They're cartoons, right? So, I also tried to think how to approach this, and the way I looked at it is I was like, well, we all have different characters that we kind of put out there, So like, you know me very well. We've known each other for many, many years. My friends from high school know me very well, but most of the people that have known me for like less than 5 years don't deeply know me or know anyone. They know one of the characters that you put on in order to walk through the world. So for your characters, I was like, one of them I could see would be Charizard, because he's like big, strong, powerful, but like doesn't take too much from people, like
Yeah.
as a like very 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 powerful, very regal, but has a low tolerance for when somebody says, well, here's the dumb thing we're gonna do. Is like, yeah, I'm not gonna do that.
Not gonna do that. And I did consider Charizard, but I was like, is this too self-aggrandizing? Like the big on the cover of the box, right?
Right, like the star of the show. No, I could definitely see one of the Charmeleon, Charizard, and then for for the one character for when you really get worked up about stuff, I thought Voltorb.
I also considered that because I was like, eventually explodes when things aren't going his way. Like, I would like to think I have matured away from that, but I was like, yeah, I could imagine someone describing me this way and me having a hard time arguing with them.
Well, and that was the thing. It's not like the, oh my God, you're still so immature and you do it. But like, it's to me, that's when you get to the, I am Vlad Dracula Tepesh and I have had enough. Like, that's where, like it gets more into the Voltorb territory where you're like, nope, burn it all down. So yeah. No,
totally fair. Yeah. Not off base at all.
So for me, I was like, okay, I wanted to pick the ones that, again, like ascribe to each kind of character that I tend to walk around in. So one of them I think is Machoke, for like the big, like, I like to wrestle and rough around and have fun kind of
known, like, you could tell just looking at this guy, like he's into fitness and making his fitness other people's problems.
Yes, I have many times in my life made my fitness other people's problems. Still do. So the other one I thought was, and again, like I didn't read the Pokedex entries. I was kind of going off of like memory. Dugtrio, mostly because sometimes people will say that like I'm kind of all over the place, So I figured that's represented by the three heads, where it's like, it's kind of like three different people all competing for the mic of my mouth at the same time. And for me, and I did just steal one for you for the aspirational. I'll get to that in a second. But for me, I think the when I get frustrated and want to burn it all down, and this is definitely self-aggrandizing to a degree, I went with Mewtwo, because
because you're going to use your psyche to ruin everybody's time.
Well, more so because I feel like when I get to the burn it all to the ground, like a part of me is just kind of the like, no, here's why I'm going to describe to you why you shouldn't exist, or why none of this should exist, like I should not be burdened with your problems or this, like, because when I get to that
which
point,
is his whole thing, right? Is that he thinks he's the perfect creature.
Yeah, exactly. And so like when I get frustrated, I get frustrated by the fact that you have made this my problem, And so then I'm just kind of like, no, the world should not exist, just I shall remake it in my image and everything will be perfect. And again, hopefully I've matured away from that a little bit, but sometimes I still get to the, God, why are you being my problem? To me, I think the aspirational one would be Mew, because it has like the power, but none of that horridness. It's like just kind of like he just kind of goes around and does his thing and is helpful and has the infinite power to help, but kind of chill.
Yeah. Well, because that's what you want, right? Is you want to, when you're stupid or immature, you want to be feared, and when you reach maturity, you want to be like loved and respected. And I think when you reach like the high, like nirvana, that's when you realize like, oh, but that love and respect has to come from me, right? And I'm not seeking fear or love and respect from external sources. And I could believe Mew is just like, you do you. If you screw anything up, I have to come in and kill you with my psychic powers. But don't make me do that.
Yeah, Mew's kind of, in my opinion, like a little bit of the Superman of Pokemon, in the sense he has great power, but also just wants to use that power for everyone to be living their best life, and sometimes he screws it up, but he's there to like make sure everybody's having a good time. That's where I want to be. And I do just want to say on the show that Megan, my wife, is Tauros.
What is their deal?
Bull.
Oh. Noted.
Yeah. No, because the thing with Megan is that like 90% of the time she is kind of like Oddish, we're just super calm, super chill. But man, like when she decides that she is done with a thing, she's just like, nope. And it's really fun. I guess it's good for me because like, I very much so am like, oh, well, here's an idea. Or have we thought about this angle? Or have we considered this? And like, I think the perfect example, and if I can take up a little bit of airtime, like I think that people will appreciate this, is the story, because I know when you found this out, is my favorite exemplar of this. It's the one that I give to everyone, which is we were all sitting in your basement, and you were telling a story about how there are a lot of common misconceptions, and you said, yeah, it's like this, or the fact that turkeys drown by like looking up during a rainstorm, and Megan said, no, that's true, and you paused for a minute, kind of confused, and then you said, well, no, sorry. What I was trying to say is it's a common misheld conception. A lot of people believe that it's true, but it's in fact not true. And then she goes, no, it's true. My dad told me. And you then looked more confused. And then you turned to me and I just said, dude, I wouldn't. And then you just started laughing. So that's, like occasionally it's just no, this is not the way the world works. It's like, but I have all of this data and evidence. No.
It's
like,
okay. And you should know that every once in a while I start to get into that like Voltor worked up state, and I try to look at the little George on my shoulder who's going, dude, I wouldn't. Because I do legit think about that all the time, is you just being like, what are you gonna get out of this, man? Don't. There's no
high
victory
praise. Thank you so much. Yes, it's like, dude, I wouldn't, live your best life, do whatever you want, but I mean, I wouldn't do this.
The last thing I want to say about the Pokemon thing is if you're ever bored and you are like thinking about, oh, I'm going to go look at some memes, or I'm going to go like read a random article on Wikipedia, go to like oh God, what is this one called? It's the Pokemon fandom site. So pokemon.fandom.com. I'm sure this is 10 million other places on the internet as well, but they have, every time you look up a Pokemon, one of the things on each Pokemon's page is its Pokedex entry text from all the different versions of Pokemon. And man, do some of them tell a story, because sometimes it's like a direct continuation where they're like trickling out more information, like, generation after generation of the games. So you kind of get rewarded if you're like a long-term player. Other times they realize they may have said something they should not have said, and there's like a complete about face in like Gen 5 all of a sudden, because they're like, oh, this has like horrifying implications. So it's fun. There's a lot of weird stuff in there, and I think you could realistically be a super big Pokemon fan and never spend any time reading the Pokedex entries, because who cares? So they are interesting. There is a lot of flavor in there.
Yeah, no, one of my favorite ones, so I just looked up the one that I think is the most ridiculous, and it doesn't, like, it still always goes around the same midpoint, which is weird. But in Red and Blue, it's a Cubone, and in Red and Blue,
that was the one I learned about that made me say like, oh, are the Pokedex entries weird? Like that was my gateway drug.
Yeah, because like for Red and Blue, it says, because it never removes its skull helmet, no one has ever seen this Pokemon's real face. It's like, okay, that makes sense. And it says, where's the skull of its deceased mother? Its cries echo inside the skull and become out loud as a sad melody. Right? Yeah. And so it's like, I have so many follow-up questions. First of all, did do all of them do this? I mean, clearly all of them do this. So does that mean that there's like if any Cubone dies before having children, that they're moving towards extinction? Because it's 1-to-1, right? Like actually they would be naturally moving towards extinction, because if they're all wearing the skull of their dead mother, they can't go back at replacement levels, right? Like 2 Cubones can only have 1 child. And then like in order to be born, does the mother have to? I was like, oh my God, this is horrifying. And then all the way down in friggin' Pokemon X and Y, it says it always wears the skull of its dead mother. So they're sticking to their guns on that one.
Yeah. Weirdly canonical.
Yeah. I don't know what that's about. Anyways.
Yeah, Pokemon, man. It's weird.
Yeah, man. All right. But what are you playing and why should I care?
So I am still and forevermore playing Final Fantasy XIV, but I finished the most recent expansion. So the game was released in 2013, and the Endwalker expansion came out like a year and a half ago. And this is the end of like the original story, right? So everything that they were setting up in the beginning, like all of the major things, like that has all now been resolved. And I had, because there's other games I want to play, right? And like that game does take up a lot of time. And so when I finished and I was going through the credits, and I was talking with my Twitch moderator about it, and we were having a grand old time. And the next day I kind of had this feeling where I was like, yeah, man, we finished it. It was big deal. It's big deal. I think I'm going to log in and play some more because it's an MMO. Like it never ends. There's so much stuff I still haven't done. And because the adventure is ongoing, it has a very different feeling emotionally from when you finish a single player game and then you're like, oh, I never went back and did that side quest. Like, at least for me, those side quests tend to stay undone, right? I don't usually go back post credits, but this isn't really post credits because there is more game coming, right? Like the next major patch I think is early next year maybe, and there's still tons of side stuff that like builds up the world and like interesting little offshoot things I could be doing. So it was like, this is a weird like two-sided coin of feels very final and doesn't feel final at all. Like the game's over, except it's super not over, right? So that's interesting, but it's a huge milestone, right? Like there's even like little in-universe stuff. You get titles, so you can, if you like do a super hard fishing challenge, you can get a title that says like the talented angler, I think, right? And so it would be like George, the talented angler.
Does it have any mechanical impact or?
No, it's social, right? It's because other people can see your titles. And you can only wear one at a time. So it's like, this is how I'm choosing to present myself. And so when you finish Endwalker, you get a title that says the Endwalker, right? And so like if you see someone walking through like the starter town and it's like George, the Endwalker, it's like, oh, he has finished everything, right? He did all the available expansions. Like he's been around.
Does it say your level as well or anything like that?
It's not with your name, but you can look, like you can select someone and see their equipment and stuff.
So I like that because then it's like you walk in and you have emblazoned upon you, Lions, the Endwalker, and somebody's like, Endwalker? I'm not familiar with that title because you're in the starter town. It's like, what is that? And then that causes them to look, so they put on their scouter and it's like peep 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 peep. It's like, my God, his power level's over 9,000.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you get a weird version of that. So there's like crafting classes where it's like, oh, you can like make your own armor, or you can make furniture for the houses and stuff. And then there's gathering classes where you can like gather resources that the crafting classes then use. So the idea is like, I'm a crafter and you're a gatherer and we have like a synergistic relationship. But a lot of people will just do all of the jobs because they're fun and they have little storylines in them and stuff. So my gatherer classes are all the max level, but my crafter classes aren't. So sometimes it's like, oh, I'm trying to make this like leather vest and it needs gold bars to make the buttons out of, but I'm only like a level 10 leather worker. So I'll just switch to my level 90 goldsmith and smash out these perfect gold bars with like a single command, and then switch back to being a level 10 leather worker. So like you get these massive spikes in like, I am the best I can possibly be at these things, and but I'm still new to this other thing. And it's just when you're switching classes, people can see you doing that because like your equipment changes. There's like a little white flash. So you go from like, I'm a level 10 leather worker in the starter town because that's where the starter quests are for the leather worker. And you're like, but I need this one other resource. Blah, and you transform. And you go back and it's like, It
makes me think of whenever you see, like, look at this like poor commoner in the D&D like party walks up to them and like, you dumb commoner, and they kick him. And it's like, that's a blue dragon. And then, blue dragon. It's like, yeah, be careful who you pick on. Here, let me ask you this question about Final Fantasy 14. Should I play it?
Ooh, I mean, I think so.
Okay,
but the thing
it's
is
for the PS5, right?
There is a PS5 version. The thing is, you would have to think about the amount of time you could give to it, and if you think that's worth the cost, because it's an MMO, so you got to buy the game, but then there's also a subscription. And so if you're only going to play 1 or 2 hours a week, I think the game is super fun. I think it is worth playing for an hour a week, but it's
how much is a subscription?
It's like $10 a month. Yeah, I mean, it's Netflix, man, right? So like that's part of the reason why when I was like, if I'm going to do this, I want to do this because I want to get my money's worth. And now that I've played for 900 hours with no end in sight, I feel like I got my money's worth. But that is, to me, that's actually the biggest thing is if you want to try it, here's what I would recommend. There is a free trial version where you don't have to pay for the game and you don't have to pay for a subscription, but it's there's a limit to the classes you can pick and the races you can pick and how far in the story you can get to, but it's very far. You can get like
Right.
200 hours into the story with just the free trial version. So I would say if you're going to do it, do that.
Yeah, no, and that's legit, and a lot of MMOs do that, and honestly, for $10 a month, it's like, I mean, like if it saves me from buying one bad game, like then that's 6 months of not not playing games I don't like, so yeah, but yeah, no, because I as you've been talking about it, I've been kind of thinking about it, but the nice thing is that my games backlog is deep enough that I'm like, oh, I got this and I got this other one I got to finish up, and so yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about the trial, but I would definitely do that, and also be super willing to ask questions, because in my opinion the early game does not do an amazing job of telling you like what's most important and what's least important. Like they give you a lot of freedom, and that like for me, there were a couple times where I got into situations where I was like, this is dumb and horrible and everybody likes this is stupid, and then a real human had to lean in and be like, oh, if you do this one thing differently and that other thing you can skip entirely, then it'll feel very different. I was like, oh, right. But like the game does nothing to tell you that. They're expecting you to experiment and talk to other humans because it's an MMO.
Yeah, no, and I think that that would be very, very important, obviously. But I think that for me, the trial will help, because I've been finding a lot as I have gotten older is that game feel is incredibly important to me. So if as I'm playing and I hit attack, if the attack is sluggish or frustrating, or when it hits, it doesn't feel like it hit, it just feels like you kind of socked them with a wet noodle, I'll be like, yeah, you know what, I'm good, I'm done, but if I feel, and again, like, it's not that it has good game feel or bad game feel, it's whether or not I think it does,
Yeah,
so,
yeah, that's totally a does this taste good to you kind of thing.
Right. And so I think if I can taste it and be like, oh, this does taste good, then I'm way more likely to be like, yeah, this is worth a little bit of money, as opposed to, I don't want to.
Yeah. I'm also playing Wind Waker, which we're playing for the show. Bunch of people have requested that. That was actually like a high request game. But I'm more into playing it than I expected. Not necessarily like, oh my God, this is the best game ever, or like, oh, this is terrible and I hate playing it, but I expected it to be, it's a game we're reviewing, right? And I just found myself consistently thinking like, I've got, half an hour. I'm gonna play Wind Waker. So that's been interesting, because the 3D Zeldas, I missed most of them, right, as a kid and or as a young adult, and have gone back to them. And I'm also playing very slowly over time this game called Sherlock, which is I guess technically it's a TTRPG, but it's I think it does some very interesting mechanical things. You would actually probably enjoy this game a lot. So basically what you have is a set of resources and a mystery, and you have to attempt to solve it. But one of the things that it does that I think is brilliant is when you are done trying to solve the mystery, you just stop. Because what is happening narratively in universe is you are not Sherlock, you are the irregulars, right? Like the homeless children that he employs, basically. And so when you end the story, what you're doing is going to Sherlock, right? And then you compare how quickly you solved the mystery to how quickly he solved the mystery, and that's how you score the game. So it is impossible to technically fail. You might have a very bad time if you feel like, oh, I've hit a dead end, I don't know what to do, I don't know what leads to follow up on, I don't know what the hell is going on. So that could still be super frustrating, but you can't really lose, because as soon as you're like, this is dumb, I'm bored with it, you just go to the back of the book and you read Sherlock's explanation of what happened. And they've done a very good job of writing the narrative as him talking, not you really answering questions or participating. So if you, the player, had no idea what the hell was going on, there's very little in the like pre-written text to kind of go against that. So if you go and you're like, yeah, Sherlock, I already solved that too, I'm super smart, you get to have that moment. And if you go and you're like, yeah, no, I also knew the butler did it with the candlestick in the
Obviously.
yeah, obviously, right? So that part of it I think is super cool. Is like because there's 10 I think like mysteries in the box. You wouldn't really replay it more than once, right? Like once you know, you kind of know.
Yeah.
So it's sort of one and done on the play, but each mystery is, I would say, 2 to 4 hours of play, right? So I've been playing like one like every other week for a few weeks now. But it's a cool game to say, like, here are the tools you have. Like, so you have a daily newspaper, you have all these leads you can go follow up on, and you have like a directory of London. So it's like, okay, I want to go to this place and ask about this, or I want to go to that place. And then there's a book that's like, okay, you went to this tavern, like, what did you learn in this tavern? And then they have a system for saying, if you already learned this other information, like if you have a circled X on your hint sheet, then that means when you go to the tavern, you get this extra information, right? And some places it's like, there's a bunch of letters. So it's like, oh, I need to do a bunch of stuff and then come back here because there's opportunity here that I can't follow up on. It's just fun. It's interesting. It is really, really well done. I've had mixed success, like, because the last one I played, you have a new resource where you can, like, you have money, and so you can like hire a cab, and you have to like kind of keep track of time because distance sort of matters. So it's like, okay, you want to go from here to there, like how long does that take? What does that prevent you from doing? Because now it's like past a certain point in the day. But it's really fun. It's really interesting, and I think it's not unbelievably expensive. Like if you and a couple friends, because I think it's like technically you could play it alone, but you wouldn't really necessarily want to. But I think you can play it with up to like 8 people.
Oh, nice.
So if you and a few people were like, oh, instead of playing D&D or Pendragon or Pathfinder or something, like, this is what we're going to do for tabletop gaming for like a couple months, it's like $40 or $50, right? Like totally reasonable. Everybody, it's instead of $5 for pizza, everybody buys that, and then that's what you do for a while. But it's super fun. And I think you would probably really enjoy like trying to think outside the box and like reading through the paper to like, oh, this guy talked about that one jewelry shop, and here in the newspaper it says that this jewelry shop just opened and that they're getting their jewels from the East India Trading Company, and we know that this other guy used to work for the East India Trading Company, so we gotta go, you know what I mean? Like, it's just a lot of like like, aha, I feel smart.
Oh yeah, no, and I do like feeling smart. I will say that a lot of the times, personally, with games like that, I don't know, like I tend not to like them. Interestingly, recommended for me, Disco Elysium.
Yeah,
Hated that game. But the thing is that what it does very well. But the thing is that I weirdly don't typically like critical thinking in like that in my free time, because a lot of my job is doing that type of critical thinking, so when I'm playing a game, I like to kind of relax and what I do like is tactical thinking, so if it's like, hey, I need to move this piece, and then, oh, well, if I move this, then I can do that. And so, for example, Castle Ravenloft, I love because, it's like, okay, well, I got to move here, but if I move one more square, then I can set this up. I like that type of stuff, but trying to think like, oh yeah, well, 10 minutes ago I did this other thing, and like that tends to stress me out. It normally with games like that, what I end up, because you know what, that sounds a lot like a Escape the Room, and I'm terrible at Escape the Rooms.
Yeah, I would say there is some overlap. It does feel similar to that. The difference is like you don't have the same kind of external pressure, which is nice.
Yeah, there's no like time limit. Yeah,
and you can't technically fail. It's just my score is lower than I wanted it to be, which to me is a huge, like, necessary feature of the game design. Is that at the end of it, Sherlock doesn't say you are an asshole, you get 0 points, right? So like that would be less fun, and a computer game would be like that.
Right. No one has ever said anything so dumb in the history of ever. I award you 0 points, and may God have mercy on your soul. I tend to gravitate away from that. What the role that I have found in Escape the Rooms and in games like that is, I immediately go straight into Bard. So I'm like, my contribution execution is pumping everyone else up so they all do a good job, So I've actually never lost an escape the room because I'm so good at my job. No, because like most of the time I go with people and they're like, "Oh, we should go do this escape the room." I'm like, "Yeah," and then I know I'm just kind of walking around, and then somebody will be, "Oh, I've got a thing," and I'm like, "Hey, is everyone listening to this person? Oh, what about this?" But other than that, I'm just people will be like, "Well, George, what do you think about this?" I'm like, "No, man, you don't want my opinion because I did," and I think that part of it is that, and this is kind of weird, is that a lot of my the way I think about stuff is formulated in like real world probabilities, and a lot of those types of games are based off of fun, fanciful probabilities. So like my brain doesn't work well in those situations because it's like, well, where do you think the key would be? I'm like, have we checked under the mat? Have we checked under the bed? Have we checked all of the places the key could reasonably be? It's like, no, but you see, it was in this cipher locked thing kept in a drawer and kept in. I'm like, who in their right mind would do this? It's like, well, somebody making a puzzle, obviously.
Right. And so the game doesn't do that level of extremeness, which I think is
well, that's nice.
great because I also don't really love that. It's Sherlockian, right? So it's people are trying to commit crimes, right? They commit a murder, they're trying to steal something or swindle a business or whatever, and so their actions are usually scrutable. It's not there's no magic, there's no science fiction steampunk technology, right? Everything could really happen. So that helps bring it a little back into like normal probabilities your brain would think of. But because it's a tabletop game and not a computer game like Disco Elysium is, you could totally fill that role, right? That like if somebody's like, but we're trying to figure out like if the key was over here and we looked for things that were made out of bronze and we didn't find anything that was made out of bronze. And because you have like a mind for details, if your entire contribution was like, no, it said in the thing the key was silver, then somebody else might just be like, wait, the key was silver, which means it could be tarnished and blah, 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 you know what I mean? So like there's that contribution still has a place in a collaborative game that has no place in a game like Disco Elysium because it's all on you. I loved Disco Elysium, but it is all on you.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. No, in games like that, I tend to, just like in Takedo, drift towards the homeless person and then just live my best life as opposed to trying to actually drill down.
yeah. The game is arguably about recovering from addiction and like getting yourself under control. And you were like, no, I don't know. my wife already left me, so maybe I'm just gonna sink deeper into addiction.
How about that? Have we considered to see if this stuff comes full circle? I mean, no one's tried, but we're pretty sure. Well, someone should. Yeah. It's just like the.
What if instead of having a blood alcohol level, I had an alcohol blood level? Like, can we just invert that completely?
It's just like one of my favorite XKCDs, where it just shows the person in front of a lever. He pulls it, and a lightning bolt zaps him, and it splits into two. And it's like, normal person, wow, I shouldn't pull that lever. Scientist, I wonder if it does that every time.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
What are you playing?
What am I playing? And why should you care?
Why should I?
Well, I'll tell you what I was playing and then stopped playing. Diablo 3.
And 3, not 4?
4, sorry.
4, okay. Because it says 3 in the notes, and I was like,
it does.
I don't know. Maybe he wanted to go back and play Classic.
No. Sorry, Diablo 4, the most recentest Diablo.
Yeah.
Because I was like, you know what? I hadn't bought a video game in a while, and so had some money, and I was like, yeah, I enjoyed the mess out of Diablo 2, and I enjoyed Diablo 3, so I was like, I'll do some Diablo 4, and I stopped playing it, not because I got frustrated or upset. I had a break from it where I went out of town to visit you, so it's your fault. And I just came back and I was like, I just don't, and maybe I will again in the future, but I don't want to put myself back in that Skinner box. I was just like, it's fun, it's enjoyable, and the way they slow drip the skills to you, where they're like, okay, you put levels into one of these 3 abilities, and then once you put them in there, you unlock the ability to do a new ability, just typical Diablo, right? But the thing is, it's like, oh, well, this is a new toy, that's a new way to interact with the world, right? The problem that I ran into is that I was playing it on there's like normal difficulty, and then slightly harder difficulty, and then epic level difficulty where you have to be level 50 plus to do it.
Were you playing single player?
Yeah.
Okay, but you still have to be connected to the internet, but you're not in a world with other people. Like you were alone.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, no, there are still occasionally other people. I'm not sure how they mitigate this, but their interaction with you is minimal. You know,
Okay. Because that's
unless
what I
you
was going to say is like, how do you have mixed difficulties if everybody's in the same space?
um, yeah. So I think that you can like go to people and ask them to party if you wanted to, but I know that a couple times I would run into somebody and we would attack the same monsters, but we both got experience for it, and on top of that, they couldn't touch my loot, you know, and I couldn't see theirs, you know. So that's kind of the important stuff. But no, actually, remember, sorry, what actually stopped me from playing it was I played it for a couple of days. I was having some fun and all this sort of stuff, and then one time they were like, "Hey, our servers are completely overloaded. 2 hour wait." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I started playing a different game, and I just didn't pick it back up. And that'll teach them. So
Yeah, which is if you design addictive drugs and someone said you say like, "Oh, hey man, sorry, we're out of drugs, but you know, get you tomorrow," and then you never come back. It's like, what the hell? The whole point of this is that we are in control of the situation here. Like, why is he not coming back to buy more drugs?
Yeah, and it was just kind of like, you know, that drug, man, maybe my life is better off without that drug. But yeah, so you know, I just kind of stopped playing it, and mostly because I just felt like I had found a semi-optimal way to interact with the world. And the problem was I was playing the Necromancer, and they're just it again, in my opinion, they were powerful, but they weren't very fun because most of the stuff that they did was fairly ranged. And so at one point I was like, a lot of these monsters look pretty cool. Wish I could see them, you know, because
you're just blasting stuff off screen.
Well, blasting stuff like right as it's coming on the screen, especially because one of the ability creates an area of effect. It's like this necrotic cloud, which also obscures them. So I'm like, yeah, if they get close enough to me to where I could actually see and interact with them, I have already wildly screwed up, you know? So I was like, you know, it's pretty cool. I got the golem, you know, once I got the golem unlocked, I was like, oh, that's what that looks like. Oh, and I may come back to it, but it wasn't this all encompassing. I have to, and I think that also too is that there's a ton of side quests, which is kind of cool, except for the fact that it really dilutes the main quest. So it's very snackable. So it's just kind of like, oh, I did a couple side quests and I don't know, I'm going to go play something else, which brings me to one of the other things that pulled me away from it. Rogue Legacy 2, which I played. So my wife and kids went out of town. I played that for probably, I don't know, 20 hours in 2 days. Now, it wasn't 2 days. It was less than that. But
20 hours in like one afternoon.
I think I basically like woke up at 8 and then went to bed at midnight. And the main thing I did was play that video game, use the bathroom, and eat. You know, like sustain myself and play that game. And then which was a weird experience in and of itself. So I got really far in it and I got burnt out on it pretty quickly, which is actually one of my potential topics, which is difficulty in games, because in my opinion, that game got too hard. And we've discussed, unfortunately, we've spent a lot of time together recently. Well, fortunately for us, unfortunately for the listeners.
For video games.
Yeah. Which means that, you know, some of these conversations we've already touched on, but now we'll have them again. And then finally, the game that I've been playing is not Horizon Zero Dawn, but Horizon Forbidden West.
Oh, you made it.
So, yeah. So I beat Horizon Zero Dawn. It's cool. Beat spoilers for a 7-year-old game now. I don't know.
It's back there.
Yeah, but you know, beat Hades, kicked his butt, and you know, rode off into the distance, and then booted up the new game. And it turns out that I didn't beat Hades.
No.
But they kind of hint that in the first game, you know, is that because Hades, like the AI kind of flies off, and then the guy that was ostensibly helping you captures him, and it's like, oh, we have much to discuss, you know, and that. So, anyways, but yeah, beat Zero Dawn, started playing Forbidden West, and it's good. It's there's some weird polish issues with it that confuse me a little bit.
Really?
I know, right? I was like, this is a big AAA game, and so a part of me is like, this has to be a deliberate decision, but why would anyone make this decision, you know? So one of the best examples I can give is that in Zero Dawn, one of the big things you could do is sneak up on the robots and stabby, and you can sneak stabby them. And if you sneak stabby them, it does a substantial amount of damage that is enough to kill most medium or smaller, machines, right? So when you go up, you would go and you sneaky stabby them, and their entire body would like kind of seize and shake, as they kind of like then went to the ground, and there'd be like all this kind of electricity arcing through them as the machine died, not like the nice thing was there was no like blood curdling scream, nothing truly visceral, but it did feel like that machine was doing machine stuff. And then I stopped it from doing machine stuff. Right. They also have these parts of them that you can like shoot off, to either get specific items or to do more damage, stuff like that. Right. In this one, take like what would be the equivalent of like rams, mechanical rams. Right.
Mm-hmm.
You sneaky up to them and then you stab them and they stand completely still, like snapshot still,
Okay.
And
do they freeze in place or do they snap to like a generic 3D model position?
Like they freeze in place.
Okay. So if they were like in the middle of walking, they stay in that animation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But they just completely freeze in place, like locked down. Electricity arcs across them, but and I know why they're kind of doing this from a mechanical standpoint is all the stuff you could knock off of them and like harvest, it just disappears, like flashes out of existence, and then it just like falls to the ground. And I'm like, again, it's just weird because it felt better in the first game. It feels weirder here, so it's just like that's kind of a weird polish issue, a weird choice, so that was kind of weird. The other thing that I feel that they've kind of done a little bit was they were like, hey, what if we did the last game, but more complex? And some of the complexity is great. They've got a lot more skill trees and they've kind of cordoned them off in a way more interesting way, which is great. But man, some of them, I'm like, you didn't, like before it was, there were 4 elements that you could pick from, and now there's like 6. And the way that you make people get hurt to elements is way more complicated. And also, too, before it was like if you were stealthing, you were probably good for the first 2/3 of the game. As far as being able to reliably stealth. In this one, within the first third of the game, they've got things that can remove your stealth, and I'm like, I spec'd into the stealth tree because I wanted to be super sneaky. And the fact that I'm just walking around and all of a sudden something perks up and releases this radio signal that immediately alerts everyone to where I'm at. I'm like, why? It takes more time and energy to stealth. It should be more powerful because it takes me a minute to slowly creep up on this thing as opposed to just trying to pick it off from the distance, So like I should be able to do that. Instead, I've spent the minute I spent the minute slowly sneaking up on it. And all of a sudden I said, haha, no, wait, I can see you. And so can everything nearby. And then they just murder house you. And I'm like, okay, well, now I'm stuck in melee combat, which is what I was trying to avoid. If I wanted melee combat, I would run up and deck you into Shanaz in the first place,
It would be incredibly difficult to test this, like when you were building a game. But if there is a thing that the enemies or the challenge, whatever it is you're trying to overcome, can do that completely undoes one of your abilities, and the game allows you to exclusively have invested in that ability, that is going to be a problem for certain kinds of players, right? Because you could easily imagine like, oh, there's, let's say, magic and melee, right? It's like, oh, I invested into melee because I have this great sword and I can just run up and chop things. And then the first time you encounter a flying enemy that can only be hurt by magic, it's like, I am now completely powerless. And it is just taking pot shots at me. And because I invested into melee, I have a ton of health and I have a ton of armor. And so it's going to just slowly wear me down. And this is boring, right? And so it's like, either they have to make it so you can't exclusively invest in one skill tree, or don't ever give enemies an ability to say like, well, we've taken away one of your rock, paper, or scissors. And it's like, then, but you let me buy only stock in scissors. Like that,
right?
This was always going to happen to someone, maybe not to every player, but certainly to some players.
Well, and also too, then to me is that like, it should, if you are going to take away somebody's rock, paper, or scissors, it should be late enough to the game to where it's kind of like a consequence, right? To where it's like, look, you are now 75% of the way through this game, and out of the 100 hit point, like let's say rock paper scissors, you can put 100 hit points, 100 points into each. At this point, you have 100 points. You put 0 points into every. So you've diversified your portfolio in no way, and you exclusively do this one thing, which means you do it very well. Now there are these monsters out there that are going to be unbeatable for you because you min maxed, you extraordinarily min. I'm fine with to a degree with that because it's like, okay, yes, you can do that. And then also though, in those situations, you need to be able to easily respec to be like, okay, I made a mistake. Let me take some of these points, dump them somewhere else, which this game does let you do.
Oh, okay. That's a big help. That's a big help.
Yeah, it's a big help because I did respec mine because one of the big things I picked was this Ultima stealth ability. And I was like, I'm not using this because it doesn't work the way I thought it did. But one of the other things that the game does that, again, I'm like, this isn't great, which is that there's what they did in the last one that I thought was awesome is that, you could kill, again, like a horse machine equivalent, right? And it would give you like 300 experience. But then if you killed a crocodile machine, which was one, you couldn't stabby it to death. You can sneak stabby it to death. And two, it was a decent threat. It gave you like 1,000 experience. And if you killed something that was like a legitimate, I'm going to burn a lot of resources to take this thing down, it was worth like 2,000 experience, right? Felt pretty good. In this one, the threat and difficulty to beat of the bad does not seem proportional to the amount of experience that it drops. So like I can go through, there'll be a little area with like 5 different bison in it. And I'll kill, and each one of those bison is worth like 400 experience a kill. And so go through, kill them all, 2 grand experience, takes a minute and a half, and I'm better off for it, right? If I go into another area with these dumb kangaroos, I hate the kangaroos so much.
Mechanical kangaroos, yes.
No, these are in my backyard. Sorry, I've stopped talking about that.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay, yeah. No, we're on to your local problems.
Yeah. my local call your local authority. No, yes, mechanical kangaroos. The problem is that they jump around really fast and they change direction really fast, which means that they're almost impossible to sneak up on because they can be jumping in a direction and all of a sudden just about face and then come after you, right? And even if you can mark the trail of the one that you're fighting, like there's 4 or 5 of them, so they can all do that. They jump around like freaking madmen when you finally attack them. Their attacks are ranged and multitudinous, and that they can either attack you directly or they can attack on like a 3-prong attack, which means if they attack you directly, you need to roll to the left or right. If they do the 3-1, you need to roll directly towards them because otherwise you're going to roll into one of the electric, right? They are very beatable, but if there's 2 or 3 of them, it's a problem and you're going to burn a lot of resources to beat them. They are worth like an additional 100 experience each. And I'm like, this took me 5 minutes and I'm stressed and burned a ton of resources that I'm not going to have to go get more of. And this was not worth it. Why wouldn't you make these things worth a little bit more or the other things worth less, but it's not proportional effort to experience.
And I do find as my games literacy has continued to go up that it can be helpful and also a huge trap to get into do I think the game is the problem or that I am the problem cycle of thinking, because I would say generally I think you're probably better at action games than I am, right? If we were playing like a Borderlands, like I can function, like I have finished the games that I've played. It's not that I can't do them, but I would say like generally you execute a bit better on those systems, right? So
I think on action games we're probably about the same. I'd say on first person shooters I've got more experience.
Sure.
I'd say on action games we're probably pretty similar.
Yeah. But I do often catch myself thinking like, okay, this enemy is absolutely wrecking me and I'm not like, are they supposed to be, right? Like,
right.
The new Zelda and Breath of the Wild and the original Zelda, one of the things that made them kind of special is you could go somewhere you weren't supposed to go, right? Fallout 3 and New Vegas made a very big deal about like, just like in the classic Fallouts, like, yeah, you can go over there where you're not supposed to be and you'll die. But that feeling of like helplessness and frustration was expected and intended. And when I'm playing a lot of games, I don't always know that that's what I'm supposed to be feeling. Like this is a throwaway enemy in the first area that there's no way for me to avoid. I don't think I'm supposed to be this angry at it, right? And so like, am I doing something wrong? Did the game do a crappy job of balancing? Did the game do a crappy job of explaining to me like, oh, well, obviously there's this their eyes flash red and that's when you roll toward them and their eyes flash blue and that's when you roll to the side, right? Like, am I just an idiot? Like, and I don't like the feeling of that going on for too long. Like I think it's instructive in a short burst to say, okay, I'm getting frustrated. I need to really throw all of my assumptions out and stop assuming I know what I'm supposed to be doing right here and try to analyze this. And if that leads to success, then that feels good because it's like, oh, I almost Voltorbed all over the place, but instead I got myself under control and like figured it out, right? And the game and I now understand each other. But if that feeling goes on for too long, that's the kind of thing that will make me either walk away or hate finish a game, which is not healthy.
Right. That's not where you want to be. And that's one of the other, so agreed 100%. And that's one of the other things that this game does that the last one didn't, that frustrates me, which is that in Horizon Zero Dawn, and one of the things I think that, to your point, right, is that I love games that will let you be where you're not supposed to be yet. You know, I love that because it makes the game feel like, I mean, as Egoraptor says, it makes it feel like you're going on an adventure, right? You know, you could face adversity anywhere at any time, right? And that makes it feel like I'm an adventurer in the world, not a guest at Disneyland, where it's like, okay, well, you need to go here and you need to go. And it's one of the things that actually always bothered me about Dragon Ball Z, where I was like, just like, thank God Goku fought the bad guys in that order, you know, and that everything went exactly the way it was supposed to. Like, thank God that Frieza didn't show up on Earth, because then that would have been horrifyingly game over, right?
Yeah, if Vegeta and Nappa had been like, hey, we're going to go take over the Earth, and Frieza had been like, nah, you know what, I'm bored. I want to get out and stretch my legs. I'm going to take care of this one myself.
Yeah, or cooler, you know? It was just like, you know, he's heading to Namek. I'm going to head to Earth because we both heard that they have Dragon Ball. So, you know, we're just going to pop by, you know, game over. So that feels very story and very scripted, which is fine for Dragon Ball Z. But when I'm playing a video game, I don't want to feel like the world was made to like hold me by the hand and lead me on an adventure. I want to feel like the world was made and then I beat it, even though I know that the developers have worked very hard and I love them for it to make me feel that way. But that's the way I want to feel.
Well, and that's the experience you're paying for. Like, yes, right. The expectation is that I'm going to win, but I want to feel like I overcame something, not like you walked me to the door.
Right. And so that's what Zero Dawn did. So, and so, sorry, to your point, right, is that I think that helps a lot for, am I screwing it up or is the game improperly balanced? Because if I'm going somewhere where I'm pretty sure the game doesn't want me there yet. So like, let's say that you've got this big map, your start location is in cell 1, and then the next quest place is in cell 2, and you're going to cell 8, you know that you're not where you're supposed to be. The game wants you to go here, but I've decided that I want to go do this. So if all of a sudden now I'm getting my lunch ate by like things that are way bigger and stronger and I don't really know how to beat them, then I'm entirely fine with that, because I'm like, yeah, well, you know, I'm not really supposed to be here anyways, right? So I love that. This game doesn't do that. It's got it's got this big open world for me to explore, except guess what? I can't, you know, because it's got a whole bunch of different gating mechanics. And to be fair, they have Aloy say, if only there was a way to get past this mountain, but I don't think I can do that now. I guess I better go do something else, right? But they've got, you know, at least so far I've witnessed 3 different gating mechanics, and I'm like, no, stop it. Just let me go where I'm not supposed to. It's okay. I won't be mad at you. I'll be mad at me. Like, but let me go do this, man. Like, I see this big, and where the glass finally shattered for me of, oh, I can't go do this, is that, so there's the fog of war for places that you haven't been yet. But one of them, I got close enough to where they're these tall necks, which are, it's similar to the Sheikah Towers in Zelda, right? There was one that I got close enough to it that it said, hey, that's right over there. And I said, you know what? Because what I did in Zero Dawn was I just went to all of the tall necks because I'm like, I want to see the map. That's what I want to do. And it was really, really hard. And there was definitely one of them where I was like, ooh, I don't know if I can physically do this. And the way I ended up doing it was I was like, I don't think that's what they wanted me to do, but I felt smart and I got it done, and it burned way more resources than I needed to, but whatever. And it was a fun adventure, you know? But I was like, I want to go to that long neck over there. And I marked it on my map. And then I looked at my HUD, and there was no path to get there because I can't get there. And I was like, ooh, that is immersion breaking. I was like, oh, well, right. It's, you know, why I can't get there, because I'm playing a video game, you know? And I was like, and again, I'm still enjoying it. It's still a good game. I would recommend it. It's fun, but I was like, I don't know why'd you take all the stuff away? The old game did this stuff. What you doing?
My guess, and it may not be true of this game, but tell me if it is, or if you think it is, but this definitely happens in some open world games where they want the world to they definitely want the world to feel like you can go anywhere at any time. And they also want to actually facilitate that to some degree. Like there's some amount of you can go wherever you want, whenever you want. And those two things are usually not one to one, right? We want it to feel 100% open, but it will actually be some amount less than that open. But then the more important to them the narrative is, the less that openness can actually be. Because maybe when you climb tower number 6 to unlock more of the map, something narratively is going to happen. And so you kind of get railroaded away from doing that. But if you are aware, you think you're driving a car and you're actually in a train, then beep, beep, like a kid in a grocery store cart. But if you wanted to drive a car and then someone has tied you up and thrown you onto a train, then you're not happy, right? So like, I think of a game like The Last of Us, which is always all the way down, right? Like there's no freedom, right? There's freedom in how you approach individual circumstances, but those are like very small, very scoped circumstances.
It's set piece to set piece.
Yes. The Last of Us 2 opens up the size of the set pieces, but they're still set pieces, right? They're just bigger set pieces that are connected by larger hallways, but they're still set pieces linked by hallways because the narrative is all that matters. It's the reason they were able to make a TV show with basically zero rewrites where they lifted entire scenes from the game, because that's what that game is trying to accomplish. I think open world is like we had about a decade of like roguelite where everything was a roguelite and that was all anybody talked about, and that's still happening, but the focus has shifted in the last few years to be more about like open world. Every game has to be an open world, right? Grand Theft Auto is an open world now, and Red Dead Redemption's an open world, and Fallout's open world, and like those things were very financially successful and critically acclaimed. And so now everything's got to be goddamn open world. And if you want to have a completely go wherever you want open world game, you have to do different things with the narrative. So like, did you finish Breath of the Wild? You played it for a while.
I played it for a while. I didn't finish it.
Yeah. Okay. But that you can, the second you get off the training island, you can march directly to Hyrule Castle and punch Ganon in his dumb face. And you have 3 hearts and no tools, but you can actually win. It is a thing that is possible, right? Not only can you physically, but not only can you physically get there, but the game actually is set up in such a way that it's like, yes, you can avoid his attacks and cause him enough damage to eventually win the fight, right? But that's because the narrative in Breath of the Wild is all in your imagination, right? It's a lot of like environmental world building, and there's little memory cutscenes and stuff, but like all that crap is optional. So if you want a Last of Us style story, which from the because I haven't played Horizon, but from the promotional materials I've seen, it really feels like that's what they want. They want dramatic characters with these strong bonds, and there's betrayal, and there's, heroics, and there's villains and all that, and, life and death. But then to give you a Breath of the Wild style, the first thing you could do is march right up to the last dinosaur and punch it in its dinosaur face. Is like, well, then when is all the narrative going to happen?
But I think that, and again, like to me, this is a very solvable problem, which is why, with all of my video game knowledge, right, of making video games. But that being said, is that, I don't think that for me, I need to be able to go to 100% of the game, but I need to be able to go 100% of the areas, right? Because otherwise, to your point, like the example of Breath of the Wild is perfect, which is to say that, you spend the first hour, 2 hours on that starter island, right? Because that's the tutorial. And then when the tutorial's done, you have your world to explore, right? If you keep piecemealing the world to me, it makes me keep wondering, like, am I done with the tutorial yet? And especially when the part that you've piecemealed to me, I was like, for example, one of the things that was cordoned off that I had to complete a quest portion to get the item was just like, when you see red flowers, you can now explode those. I'm like, well, you didn't need a spoon feed. You could just give me the ability to do that, or not make that a gating mechanic that exists, or make it so, if you want to explode red flowers, you need to do the story thing, but that only is for puzzles, or like, for example, at one point before I got the thing that explodes the red stuff, I went into a ruin area, which is like you get stuff, right? I went there and she just said, oh, until I know how to deal with those red flowers, I can't go any further with this. And I was totally fine with that, because I'm like, I know that I'm not doing the main quest, which is what you kind of are pushing me to do. I'm rebelling against that. So I'm like, all right, I'm fine. That little piece of side stuff that I wanted to do, that I can't do, right? I'm also fine with, there being like a big city where it's just kind of like, yeah, man, if you want to get into this, like you're not allowed into the city for narrative reasons, because that makes sense because it's like, no one's, you're a Nora and like this city doesn't allow Noras in. And the reason why I'm eventually allowed in is because I'm the savior of the universe or whatever, right? Like all of that feels very organic to me and makes sense. And especially like if I'm allowed to just go into the area and see like, wow, look at that big city. You know what that does? That builds excitement and anticipation for me because I'm like, oh, you know what? I really want to know what's in that big city. Let me go back to the main quest and do some of that, right? But when you put all of it behind a black curtain, I'm like, I don't know what's on the other side of that black curtain. It could just be all, Funko's Funland and, like, and so, yeah, I'm just like, just let me, in my opinion, let me go to all the Sheikah towers, right? Like, let me go see the whole map and then let me get just a little bit frustrated with myself on the fact it's like, oh man, I can't interact with this yet. I can't interact with this yet. I keep trying to, I'm allowed to go into the house, but every bedroom I try to enter, it's like, well, that's locked door. That's locked door. But I get to see the whole house and maybe like look through the window of the door and see like, is that a water fountain in that room? Man, how do I get the key to that door? As opposed to you're not even allowed in the house. It's like, oh, I guess there might be cool, neat stuff in that house, or there might not be. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the black curtain. I mean, because a lot of games literally do the fog of war as black, right, on the map.
Yeah.
But I think the black curtain is a good way to put it because if you have if you're in a theater and the curtain is down, right, then anything could be back there, but anything could be back there, which means what is back there could be nothing. It could be an empty stage, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you think of like a snake oil salesman, kind of like that sort of stereotype of like, behold, right? So there isn't a box over the thing. There's like a cloth over the thing. So you can just sort of make out the edges and you can kind of see like, oh, this is a weird shape. Like, well, why would there be like a pointy part over here and then like a smooth part, like bump over here on the right side? Like, so your imagination starts going wild. And that's, I think, harder like to do as a creative person to say like, well, we need to give them some information, but not too much. But I don't think it's that much damn harder. Like it's not trying to like, well, actually, the developers and the artists and everybody, but to say like, oh, well, but we can't trickle out information. It's like, yeah, you can, because you did it in other parts of your own game. Just do the thing you already showed you know how to do in other, like in more areas. Like instead of saying there's 5 houses and you can only go into one of them, just let me go into all of them, but some of the rooms are locked, but there's a strange noise coming from behind the door, or there's, light shining through the cracks. Like give me a reason to care that door is locked, because it's in like a classic Zelda, there's 3 doors. So I'm going to check all of them because I probably have to. But in a modern open world game, there's 1,000 locked doors. Like, how do I know which one is the one that I should care about right this minute? Because that one has, light coming from the edges and so it's like, okay, so now more than anything, I want to know what's in that door. But really the thing I need to progress the story is behind this other boring door that was like 10 buildings away. So that's like, just have less stuff and make it all interesting instead of more like vanilla copy paste stuff.
Oh yeah, and also too, like one of the ways I like to play games like that is what I like to do is go into like the end zone area and then train up and then come back and do the main story quests when I'm way over leveled, because that makes me feel good and that's the way I want to play the game. Let me do that. Just like that's what I want to do. I paid the money. I got the game, just let me play it the way I want to play it, so instead of being like, no. Because if we let you go over here, you might be level 30 and this is a level 15 quest and we want you to feel like scared and alone. It's like, and I get that. And that's what like, that's what killing Aerith while I've got a bag full of Phoenix Downs is for, like that's, I get the ludonarrative distance. It's fine, if all of a sudden, and actually they did something really good in this one. So minor spoilers, but like, is that you fight you're in an area and all of a sudden these dudes come in and they are all beefed out in tech, so like, and not like, oh, I scrounged up tech the way I scrounged up tech. Like they never experienced the apocalypse level of I've got tech,
They're the Brotherhood of Steel.
No, more like the ones that lived underground, the scientists in Fallout
Oh
4.
yeah.
Yeah, So yeah, I'm the Brotherhood of Steel. They're the ones that like they never experienced apocalypse at all and continued their technological trend
Right.
from that point. So this guy so they say, oh, killer, right? And you get out of it in an interesting way. But the very first thing I did was I pulled out my arrow and I shot him in his dumb face. And then the personal force field he was wearing ricocheted off. And he said, "Do you think you can hurt me with those weapons?" And he starts to just casually walk towards me. And I'm like, oh, you see, that's the way to like, let me be level 30 so that way I can take on anything in the world. But then if you want me to feel disempowered, just be like, yeah, all of those skills that you work so hard to hone, even if you were level 90, it wouldn't matter because you don't have the right tools for this job. Like that, again, this is a solvable problem. I don't know. And to your point, it's like you did it before. That's why I bought this game. I want that. Give me that. And for whatever reason, they decided to go a different direction.
I think the sequel to open world games are actually some of the riskiest sequels because you got to go bigger. You got to go opener. You got to have a bigger story. You got to have a more complicated skill tree. You got to have just more of everything, right? And it's just like, that's hard. If you already had a big, complicated world with complicated mechanics and a complicated narrative and stuff to say like, okay, the first song we played when we came on stage, all the amplifiers were set to 11. So now what? Right. And it's like, oh, we'll turn them up to 12. And it's like, yes, it will be louder, but it will also be a less clear signal. And now there's more noise. So like, yes, you accomplished louder, but you also lost some of the point of people wanting it to be loud. Wanted it to be loud because it sounded great. You're doing a wonderful performance, but it's hard. I mean, it's hard, right? Like nobody spends hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours trying to make a project and then is like, let's make the most B- thing we can make. But it is frustrating when you're like, I know you can do this. I bought this, like you just said, right? I bought this game because you already sold me a game where you did this thing correctly.
Right. Absolutely. So we've actually managed to talk quite a bit about that, which actually I think was more interesting than some of my subjects. So why don't we talk about one of your subjects and we'll hold mine off until next time.
I've been thinking a lot about rhythm games. I have a link that I'm going to put in the show notes. I'm going to actually leave myself a note. Because you and I have talked in a lot of reviews about like, oh, the action in this game feels like very rhythmic, right? It's like you can almost hear the song, right? Wouldn't it be cool if the action actually directly synced up with the song? Well, there are first off games that do that, right? So Rayman Legends is one I really love. Donkey Kong Country in I think Tropical Freeze, as well as some of the other 2D ones, have whole levels where it's kind of like an auto scroller, right? But you jump or duck or swing or whatever on the beat. And because you are moving forward automatically, you're always on the beat, and missing the beat screws you up, right? And then you die or you take damage or whatever. And I just really love those. Like I find those incredibly fun because, you know, we've played thousands of hours of Rock Band and I love that, but I like music being a part of the thing that I'm doing. And there are music games that I don't really care for, and I haven't quite yet figured out what do I like about this music game, but I don't like interacting with the music in this other game. But I say all that to say there's a new Prince Persia game coming out. And there was a little like developer interview where they were talking about like why they did what they did and what makes this one different from previous games and stuff. And there is a soundbite from one of the level designers, and he said, and this is what I will put in the show notes, is a direct link to the YouTube video where he says this, is he just flat out says, yeah, when I'm designing levels, I think in terms of like, you know, quarter notes, half notes, whole notes, and rests, and I'm trying to like see the music through the level. And I was just like, oh, a professional who knows what the hell they're doing said the thing we said. We are at least as smart as that guy in all facets, and it's not just this one coincidence.
Yes, we are equivalent to that game developer in every way.
Yeah, in every way, including the ability to speak French because he's French.
Yeah, no, I mean, like that is something that I am also proud of us for having noticed, because it does, especially for me, I think for the rhythm platformers where it really came into focus was with oh my god, what was the name of it? The ninja game.
Ninja Gaiden.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jeez, man.
That's the one I remember us really, I think we had talked about that concept before that, but that was the one where we like really solidified it.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember like us talking about it and through discussion, like that's when all of a sudden I was like, a platformer can really, because I remember playing it and being like, yeah, you A, B, B, A, up, down, and it just kind of like, and the thing that I also really love those games. I think though it is so hard to execute on, like you can make like like you said, a B minus open world game and it'll still be pretty fun, and there are things that you can interact with and things you can't. The thing that I love about those types of games is that if done properly, it feels like you can like your eyes hit that soft focus and you can just all of a sudden like you know what it is, it's like being an ultra instinct, right? Like you're reacting before you're aware of what's going on. I loved that in Rock Band when we'd be playing one and you just kind of get into the groove and all of a sudden you're doing a guitar solo and the person on drums is just waiting, but like the person on drums is looking over like, how are you doing this? And you're like, dude, I don't even know. Like,
I don't think about it.
And so that was always amazing. And so I really love that. And I feel like Mario games can do this pretty well too, where one of the things I will actually regularly, this was and we learned this years ago, but there was a huge glass shattering moment for me in a good way, was that in my opinion, a good platformer should not require waiting almost ever, So like the idea, and so all of a sudden when I realized that, I'm like, well, that helps me figure out the rhythm of all of these. Like Celeste is a great example because I'm like, okay, what I need to do is the minute I walk into this room, I need to start running, and then it's run, jump, run, jump, duck, run, jump, drum, and it sounds like music, right? Because I'm like, if I stop for any moment, now you've just paused of the concert and all of the other instruments are playing, and I'm going to try to play the same piece of music just 3 seconds off. It's going to sound terrible, and that's what dying looks like.
Yeah, I mean that's because the way you insert those pauses is where there is the rest is in you waiting for another instrument to finish their piece, right? So like you imagine like a Celeste or a Super Meat Boy, like those challenge platformers where you like jump, duck, and then it's like wait, thing falls, jump, run, right? So it's like, but there isn't dead silence. It's just that your part of the song, like you have a rest in your score, but the level is, doesn't have rest in that part of the score. And so you don't ever like lose the rhythm. There's still the pace of like, I'm waiting for this thing and then I'm jumping, as opposed to I've gotten to a safe platform and now I'm like collecting myself, because I feel like that is better in a 3D platformer. In a 3D platformer, I like saying like, okay, I have to do these like, half dozen complicated things and like use the grappling hook and swing and jump and flip over this thing. And then I'm going to get to a safe area and then now assess the situation. Right. And then figure out what is the next, like, few things that I have to do. Whereas in a 2D platformer, because of the way the information is given to you, you want that like continuous, just like boom, 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 where you're just like going and going. And even if some of those notes, for lack of a better term, are coming from the level, it's like I'm waiting for the saw to go by and then I'm going to jump over, but I'm not waiting and like, you can imagine a cartoon like that, kind of like antsy, like, okay, 1, 2, 3. It's like, no, I want to land on that platform, the saw goes by, and then I immediately go. Like I want the song to keep playing. And that's why you need to play Katana Zero.
Yeah, I was kind of looking at some of that while you were talking. It looks interesting. And so on that note though, I agree. I think though that what helps me with stuff like that, because to me, once I get into the rhythm, I kind of assume that I'm supposed to be, if not playing my instrument, then at least tapping my foot to like keep along with the rhythm. So if I am supposed to be paused, what I still like is for something to happen that it like makes it clear that I am supposed to. So for example, like if I'm waiting for the thing to come down, like maybe have something soar over me that even if I do nothing, it's fine, but it makes me want to duck, because that to me is if I'm not like doing inputs, then it feels kind of weird,
Which is probably why a lot of those, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of those, you're waiting for the saw to go by segments, there's like a long stretch. So you are just running, but that means you're holding down the D-pad, right? Or you're holding down the stick. So you still feel like, oh, I'm doing something, but really you are resting for the purpose of the song. And then when you start jumping and dashing and wall climbing, whatever, those are more of like the notes.
Yeah, and actually with Celeste being a good example, is like I think that they do a good job with, if there you could do a rest beat here, or you could play a little note. For example, if you're running and you need for a thing to drop for you to like run past it, right? It's like you could do that, or you could play a fun little jazzy double half note by dashing up and dashing forward, and that's up to you because it's a little bit of your own improvisation. So it's like you could sit there and just play a couple of notes and then rest for two beats and then keep going, or you can throw in a couple little extra flavor notes in there, and both work.
Yeah, and I think that's a good distinction between, because like I said, there's something about music games I haven't completely nailed down yet in my own opinion, and like the levels I'm talking about in Rayman Legends have none of that. It is like you are playing Rock Band with a 2D platformer, right? You have to press the right buttons at the right time, and there is basically zero improvisation, maybe literally zero improvisation, right? Whereas a game like Celeste or Ninja Gaiden or Katana Zero, where there's a musicality to it, I think that improvisation becomes an option, and that is I like both of those things, right? But they do feel very different.
So what is it about Ninja Gaiden that in particular, it does not look like Ninja Gaiden is out for the PS5?
Oh, Katana Zero.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Ninja Gaiden, definitely. I stand by what I said.
Yeah, no, sir. I don't know why it hasn't gone to PlayStation, actually, which is part of the reason I haven't pushed you harder on you. You can get it on Steam if you want to play it on your gaming laptop. You can actually get it on the Switch if you want to play it on Switch, but I know sometimes your Switch is like unplugged. But the thing about it that is very rhythmic, or that forces it to be very rhythmic, is because like Ninja Gaiden, it's all one hit kills. Every enemy dies in one hit, you die in one hit. So every run, every screen, because it's like a screen by screen puzzle thing. So it's very much like Celeste in its execution of its mechanics. But you have some tools that allow you to, it leans more toward the jazz and way further away from like the rock song of like a Rayman Legends, because you have a time control, like time slowdown thing. And so if you need to get from point A to point B and you can't leave a room, there's no stealth exits. There's like one or two narrative levels where you move without killing anyone. But the other 99.9% of the game is every single enemy on that screen has to die. So if you know you have to kill them all, and there's like some bottles over here, and there's a fire extinguisher over there, and there's a breakable floor over here, and it's like, okay, so I just need to get from point A to point B, killing every single enemy on the screen. And you have this time slowdown mechanic. So once you know all of the tools that are available to you, then it's kind of like, okay, this song is in F major. Like, what am I going to do to play something jazzy, but in the key of F major? So it's like, I have these tools. How do I get from here to there? And because they're all little like single screeny or like small scrolling screen style puzzles, you can really get into that Celeste sort of flow of like, you look at it, you make an assessment, and then you try to execute on it, and sometimes it doesn't work. And then you get to like, they're like, oh no, okay, that sounded like crap, and then you get to take another crack at it. And it's just the narrative in the game is pretty interesting, but the gameplay, the actual like moment to moment playing the game is where, to me, like almost all the enjoyment was.
Nice, excellent. Well, it definitely sounds good. I'll have to give it a try. But it just like Rock Band, better rock.
The curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black, and you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone. There's no player two there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creeping with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you've lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how you saved the day